Hey, everybody. Welcome to Monday Moment with Dr. D. We have a special guest tonight. Relationship expert Takia Miller is with us tonight. And I'm so excited because we are talking about Listen, we're going to talk about relationships tonight. This is not just for girls. Hear me. This is not just for us girls. We're going to talk about relationships, and we're going to talk about all kinds of relationships. The things we have to tell you tonight are really relevant for all of your relationships, not just romantic ones. Relationships at work, relationships at church, friendships, what have you. We're going to talk about all of that. Whatever we have to say has to do with all of your relationships, not just certain ones. You know, sometimes when we talk about relationships, we think it's just men and women, you know, romantic relationships, what have you. And that's not, we're going to talk about all relationships. Okay. So everything we have to say, make sure you understand. If you have a question, put it in the chat. If you want to say something, put it in the chat. Before we get started, we'd love for you to partner with this ministry. You can do so at dstokes.org. You can, if you don't need a receipt, you can send it to Stokes 1908 Cash App, or you could mail a seed to 213 Moore Street, Thomasville. Any seed would do. We appreciate everything, every prayer, every well wish, everything. Amen, amen, and amen. So we're going to get right down to it. Again, if you want to ask a question, please do so. Put it in the chat. Or if you if we say something that's good that hits your spirit, put it in the chat. And I'm gonna bring on my guest now, relationship expert Takia Miller. How are you, Takia?
I am well. I am well.
I'm gonna try to see tonight without my glasses on, and so grateful that you're here. And I've been. Well, I'm not even going to set it up. I just had this thought about doing this, and thought about you yesterday when I had this thought and reached out, and just so glad that you're with us. And you ready to roll?
I am ready.
All right, we're talking about relationships now, and we're here with Takia Miller, relationship expert. I'm calling her. All right, so get you some business cards and put that on there and get you a website, girl. Listen, so I labeled this "Know Your Worth." Okay. So the question is, what are you worth? And do you know what you're worth? Because many times I always like to say, and I'm guilty of this too, so I'm preaching to myself tonight too, is that, and you preach to me too, Takia, is that we allow people to treat us the way that they treat us. We allow that. And so when we stop allowing that, we are telling them that we're worth more. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Doesn't mean it's going to go well, but I definitely agree that that is the truth.
Do you think that most people actually know what they're worth?
No, I think most people actually do not have a clue of what they're worth. Very few people know what they're worth.
How can we know that? That's a deep question, but how can we know it?
Yeah, I think the best way to find out what we're worth is by turning to the Word of God, of course, because that's where we get our worth. We get our worth through the one who created us. He is the one that placed the value and the worth on us, even though sometimes we don't recognize that.
So even if we've done bad things in life, because Jesus says we're worthy, because he defines our worth, we're still worthy. We're still worth something, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly. It's like I love the example of the $20 bill. You know, you take a $20 bill, and it doesn't matter what that $20 bill has been through. It could have been in a G-string of a stripper. It could have been used to buy drugs. It could have been used to buy groceries. It doesn't matter. When the creator created that $20 bill, they set the value and the worth of that bill. And nothing we can do changes that. You know, and I think one of the differences that we often forget is the creator sets the value, but the it's us to determine our worth. Sometimes even though we have that value, we don't stand in alignment with that value. Sometimes we we think that we're not worth what we have already been created to be worth, if that makes any sense.
Hmm. Good. So, you said something you talking about the wrinkled up, the mangled up $20 bill. Like if you handed me a wrinkled up, mangled up $20 bill, I still go spend it because
Right,
it's still worth
exactly.
$20. Doesn't
Exactly.
matter how much you've been wrangled up and mangled up and tossed and turned and twisted. And I'm not trying
Mhm.
to preach tonight, but you know how I am, how I do. And no matter what you've been through, no matter how many times you've been tossed in the ringer, no matter how many times you've been abused or people talked about you or fired from your job or how many houses you've lost or whatever, you're
Right.
still worth great value.
Exactly.
I'm going to quote the Bible. You're a pearl of great value. Wow.
Exactly. Right.
Wow.
Exactly. Right.
So we should have high standards, don't you think?
Definitely. Definitely.
What does that look like? I mean, explain that to us and talk again. This is not just from romantic relationships. We could be on the job. People may not treat you right.
Mhm.
How do we have high standards?
You know, I one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of times we actually know the standard that we want. Um, but because of external situations, we tend to lower that standard. So, say for
Mm,
example, um, looking at a job, you know, when we were kids, we talked about what we wanted to be when we grew up. We wanted to be a firefighter or a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever. We had a picture in our mind of what that job was going to be like and what our value was going to be as we worked through that job. But then life happens, you know, you go to school, you realize you don't really like to study like that, or whatever have you, you end up having some reason to drop out of school or something and you don't live up to it. Or maybe you do end up becoming that firefighter or that nurse or that doctor, and you have a boss or a coworker that puts you down or talks bad about you, or you have bad situations. Then you start to second guess those values that you had placed on that, on your worth for that position. And I think that's where we often go wrong as people.
wow. So we let people influence really our standards and we change our standards. I think when we have standards, it lets other people know our worth.
Hmm. Definitely.
And so
Definitely.
if we lower our standards, then they don't think we're worth very much. Now we know our value is set. One of our listeners said our value is set. Yes, we know our value is set, but we have to show our value to other
Hmm.
people so that they
Hmm.
can respect us and know our worth as well.
Definitely.
So I'm going to throw some sports analogies at you because I was doing this with somebody yesterday, and we came up with these sports analogies. So I think they're cute. So bear with me now. You might not think they're cute, but that's all right. I don't care what you think. All right. So think about team. Now we're talking about all relationships. So we're talking about we could be teams, we could be work, we could be romantic relationships, friendships, whatever. So here's one concept. I was a transfer. Like I transferred from one school to the other when I was in college
Hmm.
and played basketball. And so here's the concept. You can always transfer to another team.
Mm.
Tell me your
That's
thoughts on that.
good. That's good. I think a lot of times we are focused on loyalty.
Hmm.
We think that we have to remain loyal to the team that we're on, even though it may not serve us well, even though we are on a losing team, if you will, for lack of a
There
better way
you
of
go.
putting it,
Mhm.
you know. And if I have a value, I mean, you know, it takes more than one person to win at a game. And so if I'm doing my best and my teammate isn't, you know, then we may still be set up for failure. You know, um, I say that with caution, though, especially when it comes to marriage, because
Hmm.
of course, you don't want to just ditch the marriage at the first sign of distress, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But on that same token, the team players, the teammates have to be on the same page and walking in agreement and going towards the same goal in order for it to work.
Good, good. Yes, they have to be in agreement. Very good. I am talking with relationship expert Takia Miller, and we're talking about all kinds of relationships if you just tuned in. All right, I'm going to throw another concept at you.
Okay.
You're really going to like this one. Good players who know their worth, let me add that,
Hmm.
don't need to beg the coach to play
Yeah, definitely not.
because the coach knows when they're ready.
Hmm.
Tell me your
Hmm.
thoughts on that one.
Oh, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. As long as you got a good coach, but in our case, we know we have a good coach. um, yeah. The coach can tell a player is ready by watching them in practice. What have they been doing in practice? Did they show up on time? Were they
Mhm.
consistent? You know, did they try their best? How are they on the sidelines while others are playing? Are they checking their phone, or are they into the game? You know, or how are they with the other team members? You know, are they playing well with the other team members? You know, it's the coach's job to look at the whole situation to determine the best time to put the player in the game, you know, whether or not the player is actually ready. But I definitely agree with that statement.
So let's relate that to a one-on-one relationship.
Okay.
That we shouldn't have to beg the other person to play the game, right? To put
Definitely.
us into the game, I should say. To do things for us or to treat us a certain way or whatever, because one, we should know our worth, and
Hmm.
then our standards should be high enough where they know our worth. So
Yeah.
related sort of to a one-on-one relationship, whether it's a friendship or what have
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think that there's a saying I always say that if a person doesn't recognize my value, then they're not worthy of my time. So if I am in a one-on-one relationship, whether it's a friendship or relationship or what have you, and I am, you know, doing all that I need to do, hey, put me in, coach. But that I shouldn't have to, like you said, I shouldn't have to beg to be put in. If you see that I am ready, if you see that I am, you know, capable, then you should be more than willing. But if not, then that just honestly shows that I may be on the wrong team. I may be on the wrong team. There's no other way to put it because, again, I shouldn't have to beg for your attention, your time, your assistance, what your love. I shouldn't have to beg for it. It's those things should be given to me freely and willingly.
Hmm.
But if I have to beg for it, then I'm obviously not in the right place.
Hmm. So I think you just led me into something else. So let's switch gears a little bit. When is it time to leave a relationship?
I think that's on a case by case basis. Of course, I'm not going to talk about marriage because that's a whole nother
Yeah, no, no, no.
scenario.
Yeah.
But if you are in a friendship or a relationship and you see that there's that conflict, that friction there, I think the first thing should be there should be a heart to heart conversation. After the conversation, then there should be an observation. You know, now that I've poured my heart out to you, now that I've shown you, you know, how I feel about the the affairs of our relationship, how do you respond? And if you don't respond in a way that you know, that I need for you to respond, then maybe it's time for me to go. I don't believe in wasting time. It is, you know, a lot of times we get caught up in things like, oh, they're a good person. They may be good, but they're not good for you,
Hmm.
you know, or, you know, I'm older now and I need to settle down, or we have a kid together, or whatever the situation may be, or we have certain expectations. They're a family member, and you know, we are taught in the community that, you know, when it comes to family, we're all we got, and blood is thicker than water. So I'm supposed to continue in
Mhm.
this relationship. No, that's not necessarily true. You
Mhm.
know, even when it comes to family, I often tell people, you know, we can't choose the family that we're born into, but we can
Mhm.
choose the family that we surround ourselves with. So it becomes an individual thing of how have you expressed how you feel about this relationship? Is the other person working with you? Because I mean, you have to realize too that you're dealing with a person who has a whole lifetime of experiences and expectations and things like that. So it may not happen overnight. So it doesn't mean at the first sign of conflict, jump ship. But if you see that there's they are trying, they're attempting to work towards that goal, then be patient. But if there's no trying, then it's not worth it.
So you said two things: conversation, observation. Did you have another one? I like that. That you have a conversation, and I guess you make some observations about the relationship before you decide whatever you're going to decide, basically.
Right.
So, what else do you want to tell us about relationships? I just had a few things there, but anything else specific you want to talk to us about?
I do actually. I've been thinking and mulling on this concept of first relationships. And I'm not talking about like your puppy love. I'm talking about out of the womb, the first relationships that you enter into with your parents, your siblings, those that you are raised in a home with. I really believe that those first relationships nurture your physical, emotional, social development, and like if you're entering into a friendship or a relationship with somebody, I think it's a wise thing to start asking about those first relationships, because it'll give you insight into why they think the way they do, why they act the way they do, why they respond the way that they do. The next thing that I thought about was that those first relationships ultimately shape how we interact in other relationships in our lives. Do we have daddy issues? Do we have mommy issues? Was my Hey sweetheart was my hey little one. Sorry, I got some unexpected guests there. I some of the those relationships will determine how we interact with others. Did I have an abusive relationship with a sibling or a cousin or a family, some family member? That's ultimately gonna affect not only how I interact with others, but it also goes back to what we started off talking about. It's gonna affect what I feel like my worth is.
That's it. That's good.
And so a lot of times we need to go back to those first relationships and unwrap that and so that we can find the healing that we need so that we can have healthy relationships in the present and going forward.
Man, that is so good. You just said a mouthful. I wrote it down. I can tell people, well, once they open up and start talking about their childhood, you can tell a lot. And like I can pinpoint and say, oh, no wonder you act like that, like that.
Right.
Or no wonder your confidence isn't where it should be because people told you were ugly, or people put you down, or told you weren't going to be nothing, or whatever, or told you were fat. That's why you kept eating, or whatever the case might have been. Right. And so, that's so good. I mean, it is your first relationships, and you're right. It's not just your mother and your father. You could have been abused by a cousin or all kinds of things that affect our relationships. And again, we're not just talking about women. We're talking about men. We're talking about everyone in relationship. It could affect your job relationships. It could affect your home relationships, your friendships. You wonder why you don't have many friends even. And maybe that has to do with something that happened in your childhood.
Right.
And so I just think that's good, Takia. I mean, I just really do. And I will share this and be transparent that I had a little argument with my dad about it's been a couple years now. But it really upset me enough for me to look at me. And so instead of blaming him, I looked at myself, and I do that a lot anyway. But I decided to go to therapy. And when I went to therapy, the lady said, "Why are you here?" And I sat on that couch and I said, "Because I'm a superstar in the kingdom and I don't need anything to hinder my progress because I've got work to do." And that's literally what I told her. And I said, but I've got these daddy issues that I need to resolve. And here's the thing. It wasn't issues with my father. It was issues with my stepfather.
Okay.
So I was mad at my dad though, because he said he reacted to something that I told him, and I didn't think it was, I didn't like his reaction. So I stopped talking to him, but the issue wasn't with him.
Right.
Because I met him later in life. So I had this other influence in my life. And that's really who I had the first relationships, right? That's really who I had the issue with. And so I went to therapy a few times to and I highly recommend it. I tell people, call on Jesus and call your therapist. Call on Jesus and call your therapist. I'm gonna say it again. Call on Jesus and call your therapist. I highly recommend it. In the Black community, it's taboo, but it should not be taboo. If you got insurance, the insurance will pay for it. Go and talk to somebody. If you want to call me. I'll listen to what you have to say and I'll pray for you and do the best I can. But talk to somebody and do what you need to do. So I went and it was awesome. And I'm fine now. And so I had these memories of some things that happened in my childhood. And so I went through this therapy called EMDR, which I highly recommend. And so now when I see those images in my head, immediately I go back to my happy place. And so I forget those images. And so those images don't bother me anymore. And I also in those therapy sessions told her that I'm here also because I want to make sure my relationships are good. I want to improve my relationships. And I believe that going through that process actually improved my relationships with people. My relationship with my dad is good, and so I'm so grateful for that. So please hear me, whoever's listening. Don't be ashamed. Do what you have to do to improve your relationships, to improve your life. So, man, that was so good. First relationships. What else you got? Because you're just full of wealth today and knowledge. Our expert here, Takia Miller. Come on with something else, girl.
I don't know. You know, relationships is a big subject, so
you
I don't know.
It's a huge subject. Well, we just wanted to come on for a few minutes. I don't want to push you too hard here, but we just want to come on for a few minutes and just talk about this subject. Everything we have in life is a relationship, right? Whether it be your relationship to your boss, to your coach, to your teacher, to your student, to your spouse, to your son, daughter, mother, father, whatever. If you really realize it, everything is a relationship. And so how we encounter those relationships and how we treat each other and how we know our own worth and how we have high standards so people can treat us well is extremely important. And so we thank you tonight, Takia, and we thank all of you for joining us. Anybody have any questions before we go tonight? We got some, you got a couple of comments here that were good. So thank y'all for commenting. And I will see you on Saturday. One more plug. Please support our ministry. If you'd like to donate, you can do so at dstokes.org. Or you could send a seed to Stokes 1908 Cash App. Every seed, every prayer, every well wish, we thank you so much. And the Lord willing and the creek don't rise, I will see you on Saturday at 12 noon. Tune in now. I've been doing this prayer series on Saturdays. And I'm going back to the Lord's, what we call the Lord's Prayer, which is really the model prayer. And the title of my message is Thy Kingdom Come. So we're going to talk about the kingdom on Saturday and praying for the kingdom. So the Lord bless you and the Lord keep you. And we'll see you on Saturday. Thank you, Takia.
Thank you. Thanks for